In this video, we are going to use HTML, CSS, Flexbox to make a single landing page portfolio site so you can show off the projects that you're making so you can get a job in tech. Let's get into this. This is the site that we're making. We have our hero image that has a little bit of animation going on here to capture the viewer's eye. We have our nav bar there, but we also have our resume button, which is a great CTA call to action button because an employer will click that right away, get your resume, and they'll be more interested in finding out about you. We have our project section here. So if we had 3 websites, we would have that. But as we highlight over them, we have that little animation pop-up that happens where we have the project name, the description of whatever the project is, and a button to redirect us to that project. I just have some generic images there for placeholders. We have a little about section where we'd have a picture of ourselves and a little bit of a description. We don't need a lot of information. That's what the interview is for, right? And then we have our social media link. And of course, this is entirely responsive. And when we get to the mobile view, our menu now transforms to the bottom of the screen. Big deal right there. And our projects now go to single cards and the shapes have changed and we have everything going there. And the best part about this is it'll work on all our tablet links. We have our breakpoint set up as soon as it reaches tablet width, it'll go to the bottom. But as you can see here, the cards will keep condensing down until there's no more space for them. So fully responsive in that respect, but this will even work on the smallest of screens. So let's get into this. So the only thing I've done so far is I have this empty folder here and I've got 5 images. Now you can use whatever images you want. Most of these images I got from unsplash.com, so it's not difficult at all to locate these images, but I'm sure you would actually have images that you would be proud of. And of course, you know, my background hero image is just me. So this is the image that we end up using for our hero section. And this is the image that I use for my about section. And then I just have this basketball image, an office image, and a store website that I just took off of anywhere. You can use anything. And that's why I'm using these, just to show you can use anything that you want in these sections. But what I'm going to do right now is let's go ahead and create a new file. We'll name this index.html. And the first thing that we're going to do is hit !enter. And that now gives us this boilerplate text right here for HTML. I want to go into my title and I want to rename this to portfolio site because that's what this is. And one thing that I really want to do is make sure that we're going to be using Font Awesome. So I'm going to be adding my Font Awesome link here. Now you can easily go to fontawesome.com. All you got to do is enter your email address and they will mail you your own Font Awesome link. So not a big deal there. And I know I'm going to be using CSS. So I'm just going to go ahead and link a style sheet of style.css just so I have that ready for me. So the first thing I want to do is actually start making our navigation bar for our desktop view. So we're going to have 2 different views. We're going to have one for desktop and we're going to have the one for mobile that it transforms. But I want to focus on the desktop one first. I'm going to go ahead and write comments for our desktop nav bar and end of desktop. I like having that separated, and it lets me easily find the sections that I'm looking for. So that will be something that we're doing throughout this entire project. So just get used to that. The first thing that I want to do is create my section with an ID of nav. And that's basically allowing us to know that this section right here belongs to the navigation. And you can easily use this as a div, but I think as you start getting more advanced into development, you're going to realize it's going to be very good to use special syntax like sections and articles and all that good stuff instead of always using divs because it helps you out in reading the code. First div that I'm going to do is a class of navbar, and that is allowing me to have this div that is going to be contained inside of navbar. And then I'm going to have my div of my class of links of all the links that I plan to have. To have my links, I want to have a UL, which is an unordered list. So that is going to give me a list of links that I can now manipulate and keep together. And for every UL we have, every unordered list, we're going to need list items or LIs. And our links will all be LIs. So the first LI that I'm going to have is basically what would be my quote unquote logo. And it is a link with the href of name. And it's going to be my name, Danny Thompson. Now you can enter whatever you want there. and it's a list item. So that's the first list item of this unordered list. The second list item is our projects. So we'd want to be able to go to our project section, and we want to have that link where it would showcase all the projects that we've made so far. Then our third list item is our about section, and it's got the ahref of about me. The last one is going to be our contact section for contact me. Now, a very cool tool that you're going to want to use if you don't have it already, you can go to the extension section over here and search live server. It is this purple icon right here. Install that. I've already got it installed. And what that basically does is it allows you to create a live version of your website. So right now, this is currently what we have, and we need to turn that to this. So we got some styling that we need to do. So let's get on that. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new file right now. We're going to save it, and we're going to name it style.css. And I'm going to import a font right here. And to import your font, you can go to Google Fonts and pick out whatever font you like, and it'll provide you a link. And so I just have the basic 300, 400, and 700s. So you can go ahead and import that. Then I have my basic styling right here, just to make sure everything is lined up properly. We have our margin of 0. We've got our padding of 0. And then we have our box sizing of border box. I know we're going to be using a lot of the same colors over and over and over. Instead of having to write the exact same numbers over again, I'd really like to create a variable to hold this information. So what I'm going to do is do root. The first thing I'm going to do is write our blue text, and it's going to be this value right here. I just selected one at random, but it's about the color I want it to be. And then we have our dark blue, and same thing. I just went to a dark blue color right there. And the last thing I have is a mid blue. So it's not So it's not light blue text like the blue text over there, but it's not dark either. It's somewhere in between. So it gives me 3 colors to work with. So I know we're going to have a mobile navigation. And if I don't set this now, the mobile navigation is going to show at the same time as the desktop navigation. So what we can do is I know my mobile nav is going to be an ID. So mobile nav, we're using the hash symbol for the ID. And I'm going to do a display of none. So now at the regular desktop width, it will not be visible. I know we have our div here of navbar, and everything is inside of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do our navbar. Our position is absolute. The Z index, because I need that index on top of everything else, is going to be 2. And the reason for that is we're also going to have an overlay, and I need that Z index to be higher than the container. Z index is essentially saying we're placing things on top of each other. Which position is it going to be on? The higher the number, the bigger that position is going to be, so it will be on top of other items. So by setting our Z index to 2 instead of 1, that means whatever is at Z index number 1, the 2 position will be on top of that. And our width is going to be 100% of the page. Our HTML, and we have our font family, and we're going to set it to the Montserrat, the font that we just imported. And as a backup, in case Montserrat doesn't work, we're going to have our sans serif. And we're going to put our A. We want none of the links to have any text decoration whatsoever. And now that we have these basics out of the way, I should bring this here. I'm going to create a comment here that says nav bar section. We know in our navigation bar, we have our unordered list. So I want to do some specific styling to the unordered list. And then we are going to style the list items that are inside of that list. First thing we're going to do is our display of flex. We are basically saying here, we are initializing that we are going to be using Flexbox. Flexbox is one of the best tools that we have to center things, to align things, and to move things around. It is going to be vital and key to everything that we're doing on this website today. So definitely get comfortable in writing display flex, align items center, which is that right there. And in this situation, we are doing a justify content space between, which means as we save here and we go back, you can see our links have now spread out across all of the space here. Instead of being pushed to the center or only being pushed to one side, or the way we saw it before, it was all in a singular column here. And as you can see, nothing is underlined anymore. We're going to add a little bit of padding there, and padding, the first value would be top and bottom. The second value would be left and right. And now that I saved that, you can see it's been pushed from the sides. We're doing a list style of none, meaning I don't want anything to be visible there. And so now you see the bullet points have now disappeared. We're doing a height of 10 view height. View height is essentially your screen is split up into 100 pieces, and we are taking 10 of those available pieces for our navigation bar. And now you see it's given us a little bit of space there. We are doing a background color. It's a gray with a little bit of transparency. And that's it for our UL. So let's now focus on our LIs, our list items. And we're doing A because they're links. And what we're doing here is we're doing a display of block. We're doing our color as white. We're doing text decoration as none. And we're doing our font size of 1.5 rem. So now we see this has become white, but I want our name here to be a different color, so it kind of stands out a little bit. And so when we come back here to our name section, we see that this has an ID of name. So let's go ahead and manipulate that. We have name here. We're going to use our color, and we're using variable of blue text that we defined up here, if you remember correctly. So that is going to be the color for our name, our blue text right there. I want the font size to be 30 pixels. I want it to be a little bit bigger. I want the font weight to be bold. I want it to be prominent. So we'll save that. We'll come back, and now it's bold. But it's hard to kind of see all this over this white background. Don't worry about that. That is where our hero image is going to go, if you remember correctly. So you see it's a very little transparency, but it gives it that little bit of separation. And at this point, we are currently fully done with our desktop version of our navigator. So what we're going to do here now is make our comments for our hero section, so that way we can differentiate which sections that we're in. We're making our section ID like we did above, but this time we're giving it the ID of hero because this is our hero section. We are doing a div with the class of container because we need our container. Now this is going to be our overlay. We're going to have an image, and above our image we're going to have a little bit of a dark overlay, and we are adding an image container, and that image container is going to hold our image that we add. Outside of our container, we are going to have our hero text, which will be on top of the overlay. The first thing that we're going to need in our hero text is going to be an H1. And what we're going to do here is I want to style the very first word of the hero text, and that is going to be the solving word. So we're going to place that in a span, and a span essentially gives us the ability to style this one thing. After that, I'm going to add a line break, and I'm going to go ahead and write problems and creating. Adding another line break is going to be solutions. So basically what we're saying is solving problems and creating solutions, and I want to have it on 3 different lines. Underneath that is where I have our resume CTA, or our call to action. We want them to download our resumes, right? We want to get these jobs. And inside that, we are going to have the word resume, and I want to style that as well. So I also have that in a span. And so that is our hero section. So let's go to our styling, and we'll get over here. So what we're going to do now, we'll make another comment, and we're going to name this our hero section, is do our container. And inside of our container, we're going to do a position of relative because we want it relative to where we tell it to go. We want a height of 100 view height, meaning we want 100% of the space on that landing position for this. We want this background image to take up that entire space when the user or the client first gets onto our website. We want that width to be 100% of that space. We want no space being available. And we want the overflow being hidden, meaning if anything exceeds the dimensions that we've just listed out, we don't want it being visible. So we don't want anything being excess or being shown to the side. And so now we're going to have our image container, which is going to hold our image. We want the position to be relative. This is where we declare our background image. And if I go to my images here, you can see I have hero image, and that is this photo right here. So I want it to be our background image. So I am using, it's in its own folder of images. So /images/hero image. And that basically allows me to use that image. Now you can name it whatever you want. Whatever that file name is what you should be using there. We want the background size to cover, meaning we want it to cover the entire area that we have listed over there. And the background position is center. I want to be in the center of that image. Now we need that height to be 100% of the container area. We also need it to be the width of 100%. We want the margin top to be 0, meaning I want this at the very top of the page and taking up the entire space. And what we're doing here is we're going to be saying we're making an animation, and that animation name is going to be scale. And we want it to take 15 seconds long to do something. Now, what we need to do now is actually define what scale is. So here we have an at keyframes, which means we are declaring this to be an animation, and the name of that is going to be scale. Now what we're saying here is at 0%, we want this to happen, and that is for our transformation of our image to be a scale of 1.5 times what its normal size is. And now at 100%, we want it to transform to a scale of 1 times its normal size, meaning its actual size. So it's going to decrease from 1.5 to 1. So we will now save that. We will go to our site and we see our animation of our image is actually working. It is zooming out, but it's still kind of bright for what we want. So this is where the overlay is going to come in. But you can see here now where we had the problem before of seeing our navigation bar because the text was white. Well, on a white background, that's kind of hard to see, but on a blue, it pops perfectly and it's perfectly visible. So now we're making our overlay. We want the position to be absolute instead of relative because we want it exactly where we want it to be, not relative to the page, but when it's absolute, we're dictating exactly where it's going to go. We need the height to be 100%. We need the width to be 100%. We need the top to be 0, meaning it has to start at the very beginning. We need the left to be 0, meaning it starts at the very left of the page. We need our background to be 0, 0, 0, which is essentially black. And we need an alpha of 0.4, which means the opacity. So as we can see here, this is the opacity, and we want it to be 0.4. And we want the Z index to be 1. So if you remember above, we listed this Z index of 2 for the nav bar. That's because we want the nav bar to be on top of the overlay. So here we have the Z index of 1, which will make the overlay underneath the nav bar. And now that is. So now it's got a little bit of a dark pigment to it. It now will allow our text that we write here to pop. So as we see here, we want this text to be in this section right here, and we want it to be popping, we want it to be visible, and that's what we're going to do now. So now we want to work on this hero text. We want the display to be flex. We want to use Flexbox here. We want to justify that content, and we want to align the items to the left. We want it left aligned, not center aligned. We're using flex direction column, meaning we want everything to be in a straight column instead of in a straight line. We want the position to be absolute. We want to dictate where it goes. We want the top to be 35%. We want the left to be 10%. Notice how we're using percentages. This will help in the responsiveness of the page. We have a font size of 25 pixels. We have a color of white. And one cool thing that I wanted to do just to teach you something extra is I didn't write all the text in this section capitalized, right? These are lowercase letters. So instead of going back and changing it to uppercase, one cool thing that we can do is text transform uppercase, and that now converts everything to an uppercase value. And we have a Z index of 2. And why do we have 2? Because here our overlay is 1. So I want this text on top of the overlay the same way we did our navbar. And we will save that. We'll take a look, and we have this. Now we have our resume button that we need to transform, and we need to style this word right there. So we have our first word, which back here you can see we have a span of first word, which is around solving. So we got our first word. Only thing we're going to do is we have our color, and we're going to use that variable of blue text again. So we save that, and we come over here, and we now have our first word styled. And now we need to do our resume. So we have our resume CTA, our call to action button. What I want to do around this is I want to create a border. That's going to give us our box look. And I want this to be 2 pixels. I want it to be solid. And the variable that we're going to use is our blue text variable again. I want the width to be about 175 pixels. We can adjust this if we need to, but we'll check it out in a second. I want the padding to be 30 pixels. I want the margin top to be 20 pixels. I want a little bit of space. And I also want our resume text color to be white. Oops. Come here, and now we have this box here. This great look, white popping instead of that blue color that I was showing. So let's go ahead and do resume CTA, and we're going to add a hover state to this, which basically says when this is being hovered, I want this to happen. And what we're going to do here is we're going to add like a little bit of a gray. So we'll do 100, 100, 100. And as you can see, this is a little bit of a dark gray, but we have an alpha channel of 0.4. We save that, we come back. And so it adds this little bit of, lets the user know that the button is working. So now we're going to come here, and we're going to go ahead and make our project section. And this will show off our projects. And now we have our section ID, and that is going to be projects. And inside projects, we're going to have a div, and we're going to name this the class of project container. And inside project container, we're going to have our heading for that area, and we're going to call it projects. So we're just going to make one div here. We'll name it project header, and we'll have projects listed there. And inside of our projects, Inside of our project container, we're going to have project. And basically what we're going to do inside of projects is we'll have multiple project items, and each item will be our websites. So we have our first project item that we're listing out here, and we're going to name this one a class of office project because the first item that I have is an office website. You can name this whatever you want, but for me, it's going to be an office project. Inside the office project, we're going to have a text container where we contain all of our text. And so the first thing is we have our H2 element. Our name for the project is office website. Inside of office website, I'm going to have our content. And our content is a paragraph of lorem ipsum. And if you want a real easy way to create some lorem text, you could do lorem 10, for example, and it'll give you 10 lines of lorem ipsum. Outside of our content section, I want to have a button. And the button is going to be our ability to go to another website. I have an ahref, and since I don't have another website I want this to go to, I'm just going to use a hash symbol here. And the ahref makes this entire button clickable, so we will go ahead and make this as view project. And that's it. And so what could be cool to making this is for each project that we know, it's going to be a project item. So I'm going to go ahead and copy each project item, separate it with a space, and that is our second project item. And here I would name this our store project since this is a store, and then I would change this text here to say store, and that is the only difference. And then I will create that space one more time. And for our third project, which is a sports, which is a sports project. And instead of sports, I'll call it sport. And then here I will call this sport website, and I will save that, come back here, and now we have our project header, we have our office website, we have our lorem and the view project button, which goes nowhere. And then we have the same thing for our store website and the same thing for our sport website. And so now we need to style this. So we will go ahead and create this section here, and we'll name this the project section. And so we have our very first thing, which is the project container, which is the container for that entire project section. We need the width to be 100%. We need the height to be auto, meaning if we have more items going in there, we want it to automatically adjust. Or once it goes responsive and the cards drop to a lower level, we want the height to automatically adjust to that as well. So now we're styling our project header. I want the font size to be 4 rem. I want the display to be flex because we're using Flexbox. Align items as center. Justify content as center. I want a margin of 20 pixels all around it. Now inside of our project container and under our projects header is where we're going to have our projects. And I want to use Flexbox to organize them. So we need a separate div to organize those things. So display flex, align items, justify content. This is the key here, flex, flow, wrap, which basically means when the space is exceeding, wrap it to the next section of space, which basically means you have 3 projects on one line. Well, if there's only space for 2, go ahead and display those 2 and put the third one on a new section of equal height. This is the key to making sure all the cards drop down to where we want. If you leave this out, you're going to be very, very upset. And let's start on our first project, which is the office project. I want the width to be 400 pixels. I want the height to be 400 pixels. I want the background to be white. I want the position to be relative to the space that we're using. I want to add a box shadow. So basically what we're doing here is we're adding a shadow to the card that we're creating, and we want the shadow to be black, which is barely visible. So it's a 0.2 on the alpha channel, and we're using a minus 15 pixels, 7 pixels, 30 pixels. Now you can mess with this however you want. This just works for what I'm doing here. We want a border radius of 10 pixels on that card. I want a margin of 50 pixels. I want a little bit of space. The background image is my office JPEG image. The background size is cover up all the available space that we're using. The background position is center. I want the center of that image being shown. And that's it. Save that and go down. And now we have our image here. We have our office website text here. We have the description text here that we're using and our view project button. So now we need this text to go down. We need it to be a white border area for that as well. And we need to do the same thing for these websites. And so as we go here, you can see our office website is at the bottom, store website, and we need to also create this hover effect. So that's our next focus. Now what you can do is literally just copy this entire section, paste it twice, and the only difference that we're doing is changing the location of our images And we can save that and we come back here and now we have the images showing. So now we can go focusing on our text content area. We're gonna do text container. So we have our text container. I want the position to be absolute, so we dictate where it goes. I want the height to be 75 pixels. I want the width to be 100%. I want the Z index to be 2. I want the left to be 0. I want it to start right away. I want the bottom to be 0. I want to start it from the bottom. The background color is going to be white. Now, this is key. I want the overflow to be hidden, meaning if there's anything exceeding our area, I want that to be hidden. And to kind of show you what I'm talking about, we can come here and you see this is the way it looks right now. But if I remove this overflow hidden and save it, you now see everything exceeding the card is now visible. This last line should be cut off. The view project button should be cut off. So by adding the overflow hidden back, it is now gone. The cool thing I want to do here with our text container, I want to add a hover effect to it. And I want the height to increase to 250 pixels. And I'll save that and we'll go back to this. And now that height exceeds. Cool little effect, huh? I know we have our name. So I want the margin top to be 10 pixels. I want to use the color and I want the variable dark blue. So the title for that, I want it to be dark blue. I want it to pop. And I want that font size to be a little bit bigger. So we're going to double it to 2 rems. Save that, come back here. And now it's popping, it's bolder, and it looks good. And so for our content section, I want to go ahead and add a padding of 25 pixels for the top and bottom, but 0. So for our left and right would be 0. And I want to use our color, and I want that to be our variable of mid blue. So it's not the dark blue, and it's not the blue text that we've been using in other areas. We're going to use that mid blue section. So when we come back here, now when we hover, this is the text, this is our description. This is our title, this is our button, but now we don't see any of that description text being shown when the card is not being hovered. And so now I want to work on that button. So I want that border to be very bold. I want 5 pixels, solid border, and I want to use that variable of blue text. I want that width to be about 160 pixels. I want to add a shadow to it, so that's our shadowing. I want to add our padding. I want to add a margin bottom. I want to keep that bottom fresh. Now when I come back here, we have our button raised up. We have our button there with the box shadow around it. And it looks good. Time to work on our about section now. So I added our end of project section comment here. And now I've created our about section and our end of about section comment here. So we're going to add our section ID, and that's going to be about me. We're going to have our div class of about container because we want the container for the about section. We have our div class for an about section, the section inside the container. We have our div class of image container, and that's going to be holding our image. We have a div class of about image, and we're going to use that to display our image inside the container. And outside of that image container, we have our about text, which is just some lorem ipsum, where we have our text about ourselves. And that's it. So now we're back to our CSS, and we'll need that capitalized so it's easier to see. What I'm going to do is our about container. I want that container to have a margin of 10%. I want it to be pushed out. I want the width to be 80% because I want to have some white space on the sides. I want the height to be auto in case it needs to increase or decrease. I want it to be automatic. I want the background color to be slightly darker than white, just enough to make it pop. As you can see, it's just ever so slightly more than white. We have a little box shadow around it, just like we did above, same thing. And we'll save that and we'll come back here. And now this is in a box shadow. It's about the same length as our project section, so it looks good and clean. So now we're doing our about section. Since we're gonna have an image and I wanna have the image beside the text, so let's use a Flexbox again. So display a flex, align the items by center, justify the content by center, flex will wrap. If it gets too small, I want it to go to the next page or next area. And so now we're gonna create our about image. The height is 450 pixels. The width is 400 pixels. The background images is the images folder, and it's the me JPEG that I named me. The background size is cover. I wanted to cover all that space. The background position is center. and we'll save that and we'll come back. And now we have the image, but I want this text to go on the side here. So we're going to do the about text. The height is auto. The width is 40% of that area. The font size, I want it to be a little bit bigger, so 1.5 rems. And the margin left will be 100 pixels. I'll save it. We'll come back, and now they're side by side. It's definitely prominent. If we need more area, we have it, and you can write everything you want about yourself. And the last thing that we're going to need to do for our area is our social icons. And I'm just going to leave that blank, and we're going to come back to our HTML portion, and we're going to go ahead and write here social icons, which is basically our connect with us section where they can reach out to us on social media and find out what we're doing. And we can use our, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you want to use, any icons. So we have our social icon / contact me and our section of ID called contact me. And we have our div class of social icons. And inside here, we're going to have 3 icons. We can use the first one for, let's say, Facebook. Our second one will be Instagram. Our third one will be Twitter. And this is where our font awesome is going to kick in. So we have an ahref, which is not going anywhere. And our font awesome is our I with the class of fab, fa, Facebook, which is the name to pull that icon. We're going to do the same thing with our Instagram one and with our Twitter one. So now we have 3 icons here. So we'll save that. We'll come here and you'll see Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Obviously, I want this to go across the bottom so that way it's nice, big, and people can click on it. So now we're going to style our social icons, display a flex for Flexbox, align the items in center. We're going to justify the content with the space between. We're going to use a font size of 2 rems, our width of 30%. Our margin is going to be 25% and 35%, which means top and bottom 25, left and right is going to be 35. So it's nice big center space. And padding of top of 30 pixels. Save that. We'll come back. And now this whole section is dedicated to our icons. So if we wanted to click here, we go to contact. It will take us straight to this section here. So now at this current moment, all of our desktop work is done. And we just need to optimize our media for our mobile so that way everything looks good on a mobile view and our mobile navigation bar converts over. So I'm going to scroll back up here to the top, and above our hero section and end of nav bar, we should write end of desktop nav bar. Save that. I'm going to come here and we're going to make our mobile nav bar. So we created our comments for mobile nav bar. We're doing a section with an ID of mobile nav. We're doing a div class of mobile nav bar. And we're doing a div class of links. So inside this div is where we're going to have all of our links. And we're going to be using a UL like we did above. And inside of any unordered list, what do we need? List items. So our first list item is a link, and that's going to be our home button. Second list item is going to be our projects. So our href is our project button, and it's going to be a folder icon because, folders kind of look like projects. Third list item, it's going to be our user, which is our about me. So the user icon is going to look like a person. So it's an about me section. And in here we have our contact, and we'll save that. And we come back and you see nothing. Now, why do you see nothing? Well, if you remember at the very, 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 very beginning, we set our mobile nav to display none. So what we need to do now is using a media query, we can go ahead and set up our mobile site. The first thing that we'll do here is give a comment of mobile view so we can easily search this. So the first thing we're doing is an app media, which says we're using a media query. We're using a maxed width of 768 pixels. This is the pixels for a tablet. So basically what we're saying is as soon as we enter the widths of a tablet, convert from our top navigation bar to our mobile navigation and start implementing any styles that we have in this media query here. So anything we put in this area will be a media query for that section. So we're going to go ahead and use our hashtag of nav, which is our desktop navigation, and we're going to give it a display of none. And that basically says we need to hide this. We're going to come here and do our mobile navigation and display of block, which now makes it visible. So we can go ahead and save that, come back here, and we will, so you right click and hit inspect. And as soon as we hit 768, this comes up to the top, and now we need to go ahead and style everything. So make sure that we stay inside this bracket. Don't forget that. And so the first thing that we need to do is our mobile nav bar. We want the width to be 100% of that in mobile space. We want the position to be fixed. We want it there the entire time, so it's easy for the user to use. We want the bottom to be 0, meaning we want it to start at the bottom instead of the top of the page. And the Z index of 5, just to make sure it's fully visible the entire time. We save that, we come back, and now it is there at the bottom. But you really can't see this. These are white icons. We kind of want this to pop a little bit. So I want to go ahead and add a background to our unordered list. So we add the background color, and it's just a little bit, it's black, it's a little bit of opacity so we can see behind it. And so now, as you see, as the page gets smaller, this is getting some space here. And the reason for that is these areas are not fully optimized yet. As you can see, it's falling off the card here. These are kind of disappearing for the mobile views. So this being the smallest mobile view, it's not optimized. So we need to change the styling of these things here. So still staying inside this media query bracket here, we're going to come here and we're just going to copy all of Office Project. And the only thing that we're going to do is change our width from 400 pixels to 250. If I go back and save that and check this out, now it is smaller, but it's optimized for the smaller website. And we just need to do the same thing for these other two. So I'll come up here, copy both of these, come down here under Office Project, but still inside this bracket, paste them, change this to 250, and then come here, change this to 250, save it. We come back, and now it is optimized, but this still has a little bit of white, and it's because of this section. So we need to optimize that as well. So we have our about container, display of flex, line item center, justify content center, background color, same color, box shadow is the same as well. Save that. We have our about image. We're going to do a margin top of 20 pixels just to give it a little bit of space to breathe. Our height is only 300 pixels. Our width is 225 pixels. Background image is the image location. Background size of cover. Background position of center. If I save that and come back here now, it now fits inside of this card. And our image no longer has that spacing issue. So we have our about text, and we have a margin left of 20 pixels just so it lines up with the image. We have a width of 100% of that space, and we have a font size of 0.75 rems. We save that. We come back here, and our image and our text are now aligned. And we have our social icons here that we need to work on. So now we're going to do our social icons I, which is referencing our font awesome icons. We want the font size to be 2. We want the padding to be 10 pixels, so a little space between them. And a margin left of minus 10 pixels. We save that. So we refresh our page. We come back here. We have our resume button. We scroll down. Our menu is there. We have our project section. Everything's looking good. We have our about section and our context. And that is it. That is the perfect HTML CSS solution to a beginner project portfolio site to show off all the projects that you're making to try and get you in front of employers and get those jobs. And no matter what we do, however we pull it back, we bring it forward, it converts, it transforms, it all looks fantastic. Go back and forth, and we see how the cards change from 3 to 2 to 1 to 3, and you can see it is all fully responsive. So I really hope you like this video. I hope it helped you out. Put all your projects on there, make an amazing website that is responsive, and get in front of the employers that you want to be in front of. I could talk about stuff like this all day, but I want you to check out my other videos. So check out my other videos, and I will see you on the next one.